All right, guys, totally screwed the pooch on that last one. Apologies. There was some issue with the audio. So on this one, the audio should be fine. Could be a little bit lower fidelity. Usually I'm using one of these Blue Yetis. Earlier, I was chatting with Dari. We had the exact same problem. So I don't know what's going on with that, but I got to be careful. So anyway, not sure exactly where it left off in terms of what people could hear. But essentially what I recall in terms of what I was talking about was in my field, there's a statistic, it's called the AUC. It is constantly misinterpreted. The reason why it's misinterpreted is because essentially people they want to hear what they want to believe, right? Remember that bias is like a heat-seeking missile, right? If you believe something, you're going to look and you're trying to find every single source of information that's going to confirm what you already believe. So if people believe that the AUC, or that, let's just say one of these checklists in my field, if you really want to believe, or maybe even you need to believe that it's really accurate, and then you find an article that misrepresents the AUC as representing percentage accuracy, well, then you're probably going to go with that, and you're probably going to go and tell other people, look at this research article. See, it says that what I did was correct, it says what I believe is correct, and so forth. But so the question that I was answering, guys, real quick, let me just reread. This was from Grace. So this is what Grace had said. Grace said, I've been wondering this question for a while. How'd you become so good at stats? Stats classes I took at undergrad levels did not really prepare me well enough for research. I've been self-studying stats, but don't have any systematic structure to follow. Can you recommend some ways for me to further improve my knowledge and skills in stats? Okay, so was at the end of the previous video or whatever. We just changed the audio on this one. So be sure to, if you're just joining me for this one, take a look at the last live stream, okay? So here's the idea here, though, right? So, Grace, at the end of the day, because stats can be so misinterpreted, it's critical that you learn everything that you can, and it's critical that you never, Grace, seriously, never trust anyone in terms of them just saying, oh, yeah, well, this is the right test to be able to use for this, or this is the right test to be able to use for that. No, don't trust anyone, right? You have to be someone, Grace, where you just make decisions yourself. And in research, this is critical. This is how you're going to be successful in research. Yeah, you know what? You can be a little bit of a maverick. You can be a little bit, controversial. But the controversy, and make sure if you are somebody who thinks, I want to be controversial in my field, usually you actually don't. Usually you just want attention. And so my recommendation, so my recommendation is to be able to watch a video that's on this channel that has to say, it's another viewer response video that I made about what I have to say about publishing controversial research, because sometimes it's really necessary, right? Like really, really necessary. And other times it's completely unnecessary. So watch that video to learn about that, okay? And stats has a lot to do with that video too, okay? So self-studying stats is awesome. And that honestly is just the keys to the kingdom, Grace. I want you to read as many articles as you can. I want you to think about that scene in A Beautiful Mind, the movie, where they go into John Nash's like little, I don't know, it's like a little hut or something like in the back of the house, and they open it and it's like, oh my, there's just stuff all over the place and it's extremely dirty and it looks like a single guy lives there, right? Trust me, having been a single guy most of my life. So you go and you take a look at it and there's just papers piled everywhere. I want that to be your life, Grace, for a while, especially if you're in graduate school right now, anybody who's watching. I need you to be reading and reading and reading and reading as much research as you can, because as you're reading that research, the seminal work in your field, the latest work in your field, don't just read the title, the abstract, the intro, and the discussion. Get into the nitty-gritty of the methods and the results. Find out what are they actually doing statistically, because sometimes you're going to find, just like I did in my field, a gigantic kind of misinterpretation of statistics that are very commonly used. In some cases, you may find that the stats being used in the field are extremely complex, and then you can say, okay, well, I've never been trained in how to do that, and then you can learn how to do it yourself. It could take a while, could be difficult, but you still go after it. Or it could be the other one, right? On the other side, it's really easy stats where it only takes a few clicks and you can do it in frickin' SPSS, right? But whatever it happens to be, you got to go after it, right? To be able to learn exactly what is happening in your field. Because in my field, I can tell you that if you want to take a look at something like Poisson distributions or something, I know legit 2 people in my field who do Poisson distribution work, right? So like probably everybody else has no idea what I'm even talking about if you're in my field. But that's the idea, is that you got to find out what the preponderance of people are doing. And then maybe you can find a subset of people who it seems like maybe the topic of the work may not be something that you're particularly fascinated by. But when you see how they do it, you say, oh my gosh, I can use that method in my field, right, to be able to answer a whole bunch of questions nobody else has ever answered. This happened to me all the time. So people used to seek me out in terms of any kind of prognostic prediction studies, trying to predict something in the future. I had folks who asked me to do papers on things like, predicting kidney disease and kidney failure, predicting, like genetic abnormalities. Why? Because the stats are the same. The stats are the same, even though the topic is different. This is a great way to be able to get more publications as well. In terms of a structure, remember, Grace, that at the end of the day, there's really two kinds of stats. I mean, trust me, we got frequentist stats and Bayesian stats. You can bifurcate this in so many ways to split it up, right? But two big forms of statistics are parametric statistics and non-parametric statistics, right? I remember when I was in the Netherlands, I was lecturing there for about a week. And this was years ago. I'm going to say 2013 or 2012. So I'm over in the Netherlands. I'm in this beautiful town called Maastricht, all the way to the south. And I remember what happened was that I got there on a Sunday and I was jet lagged AF. I was so jet lagged. And I remember what happened was that I went to this little town square, like super old school European town square. I was all about it. And I remember what happened, Grace, was that there was this little girl and she came running out of this church and the church bells are ringing. And in my head, this is like a little film. It's like a little movie that was going on. And there was this little pigeon and the little girl runs up to the pigeon. And I'm like, oh my gosh, look at this cute little girl with the pigeon. And this little girl, Grace, just puts her foot back and kicks the ish out of this pigeon, right? She literally like punted the pigeon with a foot, right? Now the pigeon or whatever, just like, obviously like plops up or whatever, then it flies away. But this was like shocking to me. I started wondering, I'm like, is this a thing? Is this a thing with the Dutch that I just didn't know? Right? Now, of course, it's not. I apologize to all my Dutch friends and, Dutch viewers, right? But that's the idea, is we can go about doing a research study one of two ways. We can either say, okay, I want to predict the likelihood that little Dutch girls kick pigeons, right? Have you ever kicked a pigeon? 0 or 1. You've never kicked a pigeon, little Dutch girl. Or 1, yeah, little Dutch girl, she's kicked the ish out of the pigeon, okay? That is what we call non-parametric statistics. The dependent variable is a 0 or a 1. It's a dichotomous outcome variable, right? And then you've got parametric statistics. How many times, little Dutch girl, have you kicked a pigeon? 0 times? Good job, little Dutch girl. 17 times? You should be in jail, little Dutch girl, okay? That's the idea. First of all, if you're not laughing right now, like, screw you, right? So that's the idea, okay? It's freaking hilarious. Okay, so that's the idea. You got to love it when you make yourself laugh, right? So that's the idea. Those are parametric statistics because the outcome variable, the dependent variable, is continuous in nature, okay? Oh, man, that's funny. So, okay. So a great way to think about kind of a structure, because that's what you requested, Grace, right, is I want you to think about every kind of statistical test that you can think of, right? And I want you to think about the parametric version and the non-parametric version. You want to talk about correlation coefficients, like R? Fantastic. What's the non-parametric version? Point by serial correlation, right? Okay, great. What is the parametric version? Product moment. Right, correlation. That's the parametric version, right? Or you can think about regression. Okay, I got logistic regression is non-parametric and linear regression is parametric. I want you to think about it like that, right? Because each one of these different types of tests, same thing with like a t-test, which is parametric, or a chi-square test, which is non-parametric. When you kind of bifurcate it like that, it really helps to be able to understand different kinds of statistics. Because honestly, I'm sure that you've heard this a million times. Just look at the actual data you've got, and that holds the secret. That and the research method you use to be able to derive the data, that's what holds the secret in terms of the analytic strategy that you're going to utilize. By the way, if you guys ever want to do anything with me in terms of talking about your research study, how to plan it, how do you clean the data, how do you analyze it, you can do that with me. Just go on my website and book a session. It's www.drphoenixsingh.com. It's on literally like all of my latest videos. You can get the link. let's go to town. I'd love to help you on it, okay? So other ways to be able to improve your knowledge on stats. Stats is a human thing, Grace, right? There's a book that I've got literally called Introduction to Statistics. It's this old school book, super tiny. I think it was probably published in the 70s or the 80s. And every single chapter is about like a given statistical test. So like Fisher's Z, right? Fisher's Z basically is group level differences between like two groups usually. There are modifications of it, but like two groups when you have really small sample sizes, right? And I love this book because it defines the stat, but it tells you the story of like, who was this Fisher guy? What was his life like? How on earth did he develop this thing? Where you got somebody like Will Coxon, ranked statistics. Who the heck was Will Coxon? Where did they come from? Cohen's D, Jacob Cohen, one of the most famous dudes in all of null hypothesis statistical testing. You know what a p-value is? Basically due to Jacob Cohen. You know, statistical power, basically due to Jacob Cohen. Who the heck was Cohen? Where did he come from? Why is it the letter D? All these sorts of things are covered in that book. I love knowing that stats isn't just some passive thing that we were given, right? It's an active thing, right? The human beings made these statistics, right? So like in my day, quote, quote, right? So like I developed two stats from scratch. First one's called number needed to detain. And the other one is number safely discharged, right? So number safely discharged was my big contribution to my field statistically. Then I developed these two things called omega coefficients, which are omega PPV and omega NPV. And essentially what they do is that they were the first statistics that were developed to be able to accurately combine positive predictive values and negative predictive values across potential cutoff thresholds on different types of psychometric tests, right? So it's something where I love me some stats, but I hated stats, like I said, right? And the way that I grew into them is because basically it helped me to call bullshit. And you guys know that I love the word bullshit, right? It helped me to be able to call bullshit on studies that didn't do things correctly. And hence the findings of those studies should not be believed. For example, sometimes there'll be, a tool that comes out and the area under the curve is 0.7. Somebody else says, I got a tool. They come, they find their tool is 0.7. And they say, frickin' fantastic, Michelle, right? So they say, fantastic, 0.7 and 0.7. Okay, that means that my new tool is just as good as the existing tool. So I looked at that and I was like, this is objectively incorrect. So I said, let's go ahead and test it. So what I did was that I took this massive 13,000 individual sample, and I said, let's build two different tools. And for the first tool, what I did is that I built a tool and it maximized the accuracy at identifying people who are going to be violent in the future. Okay, it was 99% accurate. But when it came to identifying people who would not be violent, it was less than 1% accurate. Then I took the same data set. I built a second tool. Okay, and the second tool was 99% accurate at identifying who would not be violent. But the thing sucked when it came to identifying who would be violent, 1% again, right? And you know what happens when we ran the area under the curve, the AUC on both of those tools, which are diametrically opposed in terms of their efficacy. You want to know what the AUC on both of them was? 0.71. That's what it was, non-statistically significantly different, okay? That's insanity, right? Because think about it. That is the equivalent of the first tool and the second tool coming in. Second tool authors come in, they say, hey, we got the same AUC as the first guy. That means you should use our tool. Nonsense. Maybe your tool predicts things completely differently. That's totally possible, right? So the second thing, Grace, right? So read your butt off. And look for bullshit. I mean, like, this is the second thing. Learn the history behind the stats that are in your field. I think you will genuinely enjoy it very much, okay? And the next thing, Grace, I would say is get your hands on a good stats book, right? Something like Tabachnik and Fidel, I like a lot. Tabachnik and Fidel saved my ass so many times. But that's one that nobody recommended to me. I just randomly stumbled across it, even though these days in multivariate stats, it's a big deal. I always jokingly say that, like when I went to Oxford and all, like YouTube, like this kind of YouTube stuff, this wasn't what it was. We watch YouTube to be able to see a bunch of people get like kicked in the nuts. Like that's what we use. Sorry, this is what we do at Oxford, apparently, right? We just watch YouTube videos of people getting kicked in the fouls. So the idea here, though, right, was that I used to go to the library and I would sit there with my little book and be reading multivariate stats and model development and all this kind of stuff. Some people that's really boring, but for me, legit, Grace, I was just trying to save my ass, right? I was trying to save my own butt and get out of there as quickly as I could. Those of you who I work one-on-one with, you guys know me. I always say that at the end of the day, the goal of a master's or a doctorate is to get out of there, right? It's not to do your most seminal work. This doesn't have to be the most important thing you've ever done. The likelihood that something will happen that all of a sudden is going to make you the most popular person in the world is pretty low. Think about all those people that you went to high school with, and they were the captain of the football team or the head of the cheerleading squad, and they peaked in high school. Don't be the person, Grace, who peaks in graduate school. That's not a good thing, right? We don't want that for you. I want you to graduate and go on and do a million things, right? I think that would be incredibly exciting for you, and I would be excited for you as well, right? And one of the best ways to be able to go on and do big things, and I hate this phrase, Grace, this idea of learning how to learn, but that's essentially what you need to do in grad school. And the best way to do it is not ask for too much instruction, not ask for too much assistance when it comes to stats, but learn everything yourself. And also gain mastery during grad school of at least one statistical package, something that requires quite a bit of coding, like a Stata or an R or a MATLAB, one of these, not something with a nice graphical user interface like SPSS where you're clickety-clicking and you can buy all these other modules. Get hardcore into something, buy the manual if you don't already have a copy of it, like the actual manual for those things, and read it. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be painful, but welcome to grad school. Am I right? Right? But just go through and actually get that knowledge, Grace. It's so valuable if you spend that time to be able to learn about all the different packages that exist and how you can find new ones and what are the different types of code and these sorts of things that you can actually get. This is so important, Grace. It's super cool, right? And the final thing that I'll say is that I do love me a good statistical test. The other book that really saved my butt is this one by, I think it's Kanji. So it's Kanji, right? And literally, it's just called 100 Statistical Tests. That's all it's called. If you guys go to Google right now and in quotation marks, you say 100, like 100, not spelled out, 100 statistical tests, right? End quotation marks, and then say PDF. I don't know why, but there's a variety of different PDF versions of the entire book that are online, right? That book totally changed. Hey, funny son, right? That totally changed my freaking world, guys, when I read that book. Why? I mean, legit, it's just 100 statistical tests, but it's got some of the weirdest stuff you've ever seen. For example, did you know that there's a statistical test to be able to test differences in median? Not average, median. It's called Duckworth's test of medians. Saved my butt on the highest impact factor journal article I ever had in British Medical Journal. Impact factor was 32 or 33, which is massive. Most in my field of psych, maybe hovering around 1 to 2, right? So this is a gigantic publication for us, for my team, right? And so this Duckworth's test or whatever saved my butt, and I learned that from that Kanji book, right? So that's the thing is, it doesn't matter where you are, even if it's something that you're already a faculty member, you could be a tenured full professor. That's where I am, right? And if you're not constantly learning new things and looking for people to be able to correct you, what the heck are you doing, right? It's one of these things we always need to be in that mode of being willing to learn and seeking out learning more and more information and looking not just for confirmatory evidence, but for things that are disconfirmatory, right? That don't agree with kind of, what we're saying and such. Okay, so that's my answer to the second question that I've got. Everybody who's just joined us, welcome. It's great to see you guys, to be able to have you with me here today. Guys, the reason that I'm making this video, I initially had one live stream. I had to shut it down because I was having some audio issues with my blue mic here. And so now I'm just streaming stuff off this Logitech Brio that I've got. So hopefully the audio quality isn't that bad. In that live stream, I ended up answering the first question. If you guys afterwards, hey, Ryan, how you doing, man? To be able to, if you're ever interested in this, when you go watch the other stream, right? So in the other stream, I answered this question that I'll read for you now from Muhammad, and it was, why is this a question in the postdoc interview? And the question was, do you prefer working in academia or industry? It's actually a really important question to be able to answer, and so I went ahead, I put the answer in in the other live stream. So I apologize. You guys have to take a look at several. Okay. And so here is the third one that I wanted to answer today. After I get to this one, guys, I will have a little bit of time to be able to answer your questions. So anybody who's here and watching, if you guys have a question about legit anything, right? Undergrad, graduate school, postdocs, getting tenure, publishing, anything, right? Go ahead and just put in the chat. Chat's over here for me, okay? So let me get to this third one here. This one is from Abhishek. Abhishek is the reason why I'm making this stream today, because it's been too long since I told him that I'd make him a response video. So I'm like, I'm just going to stream of consciousness 3 questions that I've been sitting on, not intentionally. I've just been running around. So Warren, I got your question, buddy. I'll hit you up in a sec here. So, okay, so this is what Abhishek says. Abhishek says, hi again. Finally, I did apply to another postdoctoral program, and I've been called in for my first postdoc interview. Abhishek for the win. They have asked me to present my research work and say how I could be a fit to their lab. Okay, so these 2 different pieces. Could you please give some important tips in general on presentations and how they're different from conference presentations for a postdoc interview? Okay, first thing, right? Presenting for a conference, and I'm going to assume we're talking about like a paper presentation. So you're standing on a panel and you stand up there or whatever, and you look nervous as heck, and then you kind of, give usually something aided by a PowerPoint presentation, and you kind of give your talk right on your findings. So that's a conference presentation. And this is fundamentally different than when you're doing something as part of an interview, right? Hey, Michelle. Right, when you are doing an interview, especially if you're something like a postdoctoral fellowship, okay? Why? It is assumed at a conference, if your presentation got accepted, it's assumed that you're competent. It's assumed, right? They trust you, right? Trust is projected upon you, right? In terms of goodness of fit, really the only goodness of fit you need is with the audience members in the room. Hopefully the audience members in the room have at least a little bit of an idea what you're talking about. Yes, of course, sometimes you go to kind of conference sessions and there's 4 papers and, the organizers just didn't know where to put those people. So they stuck them all in the exact same session. But most of the time the session has some kind of a theme. So I'm a violence risk assessment guy. So it could all be about, the comparative efficacy of violence risk assessment tools. If that's what it is, fair enough, right? If it's something at the end of the day where they just kind of like tossed you in there, okay, then it would be something where, the audience may be a little bit more important. But usually they already know what you're talking about in general. Okay. And those are the people that you're trying to, if nothing else, quote unquote, impress. But more than anything, you're just presenting the findings of your study. And it's almost like a live peer review where they can ask you questions, right? But when it comes to a postdoc interview or a grad school interview, doesn't matter, right? Or a faculty interview, doesn't matter, right? But here, Abhishek's asking about postdocs, right? Trust or competence is not assumed. Okay, this is something where you need to prove competence to them. So when you talk about the research that you've done, it's very important that we take this in a 3-piece kind of suite, right? So first of all, it's talking a little bit about, okay, so this is the field that you're in, right? Kind of in terms of your research line that you're going to present to them, where the heck did this come from, right? What were the gaps in the literature that your current research line was seeking to fill? Okay, so that's number 1. Give some historical context there. The likelihood is high that if you're presenting to the head of the lab, fabulous. They're probably going to know all that stuff. But you're going to have some junior people in that lab who don't know what the heck is going on, right? I promise you. And so you can be the person to be able to educate them. And this is not a bad thing, okay? So that's number 1. Then we've got the present. What is the present? The present is essentially what was your doctoral work? Okay, and how did it serve to be able to fill those gaps that you've just identified? Okay, so that's number 2. Now we have piece number 3. Piece number 3 is essentially, where do you seek to go, right? And it should be based on the findings of your research that you did as part of your doctorate. You can basically say, okay, hey, as part of my dissertation research, we found X, Y, and Z, and this led to 4 bigger questions now, A, B, C, and D. And really, I want to take a look at A and B during my postdoc. And that's the reason why I think this is the best fit for me, because you, Professor Johnson, your work is so seminal in that area. And I think that you already have data sets. And I think that my current data sets could also, we could do new analyses on them to be able to push forward the types of protocols that you seek to kind of move things forward. I think that I have these statistical and methodological skills to take stuff that you've already got and push that forward as well. That is how we're establishing goodness of fit. Goodness of fit is not like, I'm really easy to get along with and I look amazing bald. right? Like, I'm sure that I would probably say that in a postdoc, but it's not something that would actually get me accepted, right? So that's the idea there, okay? If you missed my rant, by the way, guys, on little Dutch children and pigeons, you have severely missed out on this live stream. So make sure to watch it from the beginning. That was freaking great. Awesome. So, hey, Janan, how you doing? Okay, let's keep going. Could you please have some important tips on presentation in general? I'll be doing it. Okay. So when it comes to the postdoc, right? Like I said, these 3 different pieces to the puzzle are just critical for you to be able to understand, because nobody wants you to go in there and just say, here's my postdoc plan, right? And honestly, nobody wants you to go in there and say, hey, here's all the research that I just did. And then that's it, right? You got to have a plan, guys, for the postdoc. When you're applying for the postdoc, you got to know who the supervisor is. You got to know all the other people in the department, because you're not a student anymore. You're a colleague. You're like the most junior of junior colleagues, but you're at the collegial level now, right? You're a colleague with these individuals. And because of that, just because they don't look at the exact same topics that you do, you're still going to be in the same department as them. You're going to walk past them in the hall and all, and no, they're not going to do the same work that you do, but you need to know the people you're going to be working around, okay? So that's really important. The next thing is to be able to go back and make sure that you have read at least the last 2 to 3 years of all first authored pieces by the target postdoc supervisor. Take a look also at their CV and find out what they've got grant funding for right now. You can also ask when they're like, do you have any additional questions? Ask them, are there any big grant mechanisms that they're looking forward to applying to, in the near term future, okay? This is the kind of information that's really, really important for you to gather, right, before you have the interview itself, okay? In a conference presentation, you're going to go up there, and usually you're not going to focus on a research line. Sometimes you'll end up having a session where there's 3 different talks by 3 people who are on the same project, and they all, talk about, a different study, for example, that was done on the same data set or as part of the same project. This is different. We got to keep this thing in a nutshell. You're not going to get in there, give a 1-hour presentation. I've seen it, but exceptionally rarely. Usually it's going to be something that's going to take anywhere between 10 to 20 minutes. Of course, you're going to be nervous. You're either going to talk too fast, you're going to talk too slow, and it's going to take a half an hour, right? But just get through that sucker as well as you conceivably can, okay? So that is my advice for Abhishek on this. Now let me get to everybody's questions who are actually in the room. So guys, anybody who's just joined us, thank you so much for joining us. Do me a huge favor, guys, and just hit the like button, because it ends up getting viewership up. And then thanks for my time, because I love doing this with you guys. You know that, right? So, okay, so Warren's question. So Warren says, hi, Dr. Singh. Hey, Warren. Warren says, part of why I'm in my doctoral program is because I'm connected to a particular community. Love it. How many hours can I work in it while pursuing a doctorate? Job and board. Okay, so Warren, can you clarify for me, mate? So part of why I'm in my doctoral program is because I'm connected to a particular community. So Warren, is it like a religious community maybe, or like what kind of a community are we talking about here, right? Or maybe it's a racial or ethnic community. Like, I was on this thing called Tufts Association of South Asians, right? But that was for me when I was an undergraduate. So how many hours can I work in it while pursuing a doctorate? It's like a job and board. Religious studies and African American studies to do. Okay, Warren, great question, mate, right? So yeah, how many hours can I work in it? It's a good question. Job and board. Yeah, job and board. Job, I would say don't do a job. Right? I mean, if you want to do something for like a little bit of cash on the side, that's fine. But like a job, I wouldn't do, right? Especially if you want to, I mean, it depends too, Warren, in terms of, like what you want to end up in, right? As well, in terms of, do you want this to end up being a job that kind of like you go into afterwards as well? Is it just a way to be able to make money? Right? Is it something maybe you can just volunteer? My recommendation was something like this, Warren, is to always volunteer and always under promise and over deliver, right? Because you can initially say, hey, listen, I can guarantee 1 to 2 hours a week, and I know that's not a lot, but anything I can do, I'm very, very passionate about that, right? So for example, like I run a men's ministry, right? So, and it's maybe like an hour drive for me. So like every week I drive an hour, I give a 2-hour sermon, and then I drive the hour back. So I spend 4 hours a week, right? And I spend maybe, I would say 1 additional hour kind of actually putting the sermon materials together and all, right? So, I mean, like that for me is about 5, max 6 hours a week, right? But it's only in the evenings. Doing the doctorate is brutal. my recommendation, like I said, is to begin with very, very few other things on your plate, is what I would say, right? So in terms of board positions, I love me a good board position. If it was something, Warren, where the idea was, hey, I can do a job or I can get a board position, Warren, get a board position, okay? But get a board position, Warren, in a place that essentially outside of North Carolina, people would know what the heck the board position is in. For example, let's say that like in your field, Warren, there's like a massive, let's say, national conference or international conference that takes place annually, and they have a board, and part of the board is actually having some kind of, they would call them like a student member or a student at large, somebody who serves on the executive board. However, they're still a graduate student. That would be great for you, Warren, right? This would be fantastic. Remember, at the end of the day, the titles are cheap. Warren, if you and I had $300 and access to the internet, we can go onto LegalZoom and start like, the Warren Board of Religious and African American Studies. You and I could do anything, right? You can be the CEO of the entire thing, right? That's it. Because I recommended it, though, I need some royalty structure from you, Warren, right? But that's the idea, right? So in terms of how many hours, my recommendation is to be able to start very low. If it's something where over time you find that you have availability, fabulous, right? If this is something that feeds your soul, Warren, right? I want you to stay involved in it in some way, shape, or form, right? Obviously, all of us are trying to make money. For the love of God, I'm trying to make money. Everybody's trying to make money. It doesn't matter how much money you have. It's always good to have more, right? You got to be careful of that propensity. But still, trust me, especially in grad school, I get it, right? So anyway, that, Warren, is what I would recommend. Look for a board position on something that has meaning that goes beyond just North Carolina. Like, that's what I would recommend. And if you want to be in academia, just try to get a board position, like I said, some student at large type thing. Maybe there's an association, like a national association, and it doesn't currently have some type of a student committee or anything like this. Somebody serving students. Warren, you should start that, right? That's a great thing for you to be able to begin in your field, right? And the reason why it's so great is that it's going to, let's put it this way, you're going to be the leader of the thing, Warren, right? And if you're the leader, people are going to project onto you all kinds of expertise, and other people are going to see you as a rising star within that community of scholars, right? Which is a great thing. So that's what I would recommend. Okay, so Michelle, hey Michelle. Michelle says, should I consider MA or MS or go straight for doctorate PhD? Michelle, that's a great question. There are a bajillion questions underlying that, though, right? I argue that the only reason, and again, like this is one, Michelle, I'll give you some general advice, right? This is like a session thing, right? Anytime I tell people to be able to, do I have one of these around here? Anytime I tell people to be able to do a session, I've got this big old list of questions that I ask. You're welcome, Warren, right? That I go through all of them to be able to get a sense of what they should do next, right? I've been doing this for so many years now in terms of consultations. I know exactly what to ask you guys to figure out if you've got a good chance of getting in to a PsyD or a clinical psych PhD. And I have a very strong sense of if you are not in a good position, which most people are not, right? Then it's something where these are the exact things we need to do to be able to max out your chances. And we just had another acceptance this past week. Go Yasmin. That's what I'm saying, right? Got into her target school. I'm very proud, right, after working with me for the last year. Awesome. Okay, so Michelle, here's what I'm saying, okay? So remember the big 5 lies. Big 5 lies are that you need to, okay, target program. You've identified the target program. If you don't know what the target program is, it's all based on your supervisor, target supervisor, right? If you don't know who the target supervisor is, again, conversation for another day, book a session, let's go through it, right? Because I got a step-by-step thing on how to find target supervisors and target programs. For the love of God, do not plan on applying for more than 3 to 5 programs. I had somebody apply to 15 programs, got rejected from all 15 programs. I felt like I wanted to cry on their behalf, right? I mean, like, that is wild to me, right? There are actually books out there that recommend that you apply to more than 10 programs. It's the stupidest thing I've heard in my life. These people don't know what they're talking about. Like, from the inside, I'm telling you right now, it's a terrible decision, right? 3 to 5, okay? 5 max, right? So once you know, let's say that I've got one target program is University of Eastern Kentucky Technical Institute. I don't know. I'm making something up, right? So, okay, so for the program that you want to be in, we got to find out what is the median GPA and how do you stack up? What is the median test score? In this case, GRE. How do you measure up, right? You got to be higher than whatever the median is, right? The next one is going to be research experience. The next one is clinical experience. For both of them, a minimum of 6 months. The more, the better, especially for research experience if you want to do the PhD, and clinical experience if you want to do the PsyD. And last but not least, for these big 5 is letters of recommendation. And you want 3 different letters of recommendation. If you want to know from who, book a session and talk to me, right? So, but people do letters of recommendation wrong all the time, for the love of God. It's terrible. Okay, so that's one piece, okay? And those 5 things, you have to have all 5 of them, okay? And they will not get you into graduate school, okay? But you have to have them, okay? So that's the key. You got to have these 5, otherwise you're not competitive, right? But there's 3 other things that you need as well. One of them is conference presentations, preferably paper presentations, not poster presentations, preferably at national or international conferences that your target supervisor and your target programs actually attend those conferences, so you can meet them and talk to them and ask them for awkward breakfasts and these sorts of things. I've done it. Everybody's done it. I remember I had this one target doctoral supervisor once. This is a true story. And you guys know in the like the poster session at conferences where it's like rows and rows and rows of posters. And I remember like turning the corner and there was the guy. He was right there, but he was talking to 2 other people. And I didn't want to be awkward and like walk up to this group of 3 people. So I literally hid behind like one of the poster things, right? Like one of the walls of posters until like they kind of dispersed. And then I like walked around or whatever and introduced myself. And we had a great conversation, right? Exchanged cards, contacted him later or whatever to catch up. It was great. And this is the thing, is that if you go to any conference in your field, even if it's a big name conference, it doesn't mean that your target supervisor is going to be there or not, right? So, and that's the second piece, the second of the 3, right, is personal connections. Guys, the answer is no. Sending an email saying that you want to be their graduate student and saying, I love your stuff, and saying, are you taking doctoral students? That is not a personal connection. It is not. There is a very strategic way to make personal connections we can talk about sometime. It is critical that you begin all of this as soon as possible. Remember, guys, this is one of these things which is like brutal, but the absolute truth, that if the first 2 years of college you didn't know what you wanted to do, or maybe you were majoring in something else and maybe your grades weren't that great, or God forbid something happened kind of for your friends and family, just God forbid, right? Something was going on with you, God forbid, okay? And you didn't do very well. That's super unfortunate, right? But the average supervisor, they don't care at all. They don't care, right? And this is one of these things that was brutal for me to understand. Trust me on this one. But having been on the other side of it, where I'm looking at applications, you don't really think about the human being per se. You're just, first of all, trying to triage everybody using stuff like the test scores and the GPA. And after you get over that hump, those things stop mattering. And then all of a sudden, it's like, do you have all these other pieces, right? If you have the other 3 of the 5, fantastic. We'll keep considering you. The conferences as well, yeah, pretty impressive. Oh, there's a conferences that I know. Oh, that's great. Maybe they were at the same conference as me. And then personal connections, right? If you have a name that is not John Smith or Jane Doe, you got a little bit of a unique name, that's the best, okay? And so that's really kind of a critical piece to this puzzle, is how long have you known these people, and is there anybody in between? So for example, right? And guys, if you just joined us, welcome, welcome. Put any questions in the chat. Be sure to hit the like button. Helps out the channel a ton. So the idea, right, is that sometimes there's a middleman. For example, let's say that I'm in a bar, right? So, and let's say Daria is at the other side of the bar, and I think Daria is the most beautiful woman in the world. I want to go and talk to her, right? Yeah, I can go over and be like, hey there. Let me tell you some great things about me. A, B, C, D, and E. Right? Well, first of all, that could go great, and it could go horrifically, horrifically wrong. Versus, let's say I've got a friend, and the friend's name is Ross, and Ross goes over to Daria and says, hey, listen, I got a guy, you got to meet him because he's A, B, C, D, and E, right? And then it's just like, hey, come on over here. And then I come over, right? And I'm super chill and super cool acting, and I talk to Daria, and everything is great. Right? Fantastic, right? Because I get to seem super humble and these things. I don't have to try to prove anything, right? But the only way to do that is to be able to say, here's my target supervisor, and then to get in good with somebody who's kind of the middleman, the middle woman, right? And then you, right, are at the bottom, right? And you essentially, in that way, don't have to go straight to the personal connection. You can connect through somebody else, right? Why? Because at the end of the day, people do business with people they know, like, and trust. And guess what? Just because somebody from Harvard wrote your letter of recommendation doesn't mean a damn thing if this guy from Eastern Kentucky Tech is best friends with somebody for the graduate cohort from Florida International University, which is a fine school, Florida International University, who calls them up and say, hey, Eastern Kentucky Tech McGee, I got to tell you something right now. I've got the next big thing, right? And his name is Jackson, whatever, right? That's the idea, okay? Harvard doesn't matter in that capacity for making personal connections, right? And the strategy for making personal connections needs to be in there from the jump, right? So if anybody wants to talk more about that in particular, again, I'm just going to put the site or whatever in here, okay? Okay, so if you ever want to book a session one-on-one with me, that's the website in the chat. Okay, so that's what I would say there, Michelle, right? And the final one is publications. Publications, you will be told over and over and over and over and over and over again, as an undergraduate, is impossible. Bullshit. It is not impossible. It's really hard, and most labs you'll go to will tell you, oh no, we don't do things like that. But eventually you will find somebody who is willing to do it, but the amount of work you're going to have to do is going to be extreme. And no, you're not going to be the first author on the publication, right? So in 17 years that I've been doing this, I've met 2 undergraduates with first author publications, right? Does it happen? Absolutely. Is this something that you should bank or bet on? Probably not, right? But you can be 17th out of 18 authors and be fine. Perception is reality. All we care about is, potential grad school supervisors. For you is that you're interested in the scholastic process, right? In the academic publishing process. If you guys don't know how to publish, publishing is the ultimate skill in academia. It's something that's not only very difficult to do, but something that's very difficult to be able to do well, right? So I built this thing called Publication Academy, which is over 120 hours of video-based training on publishing on it. If anybody's interested in it, just send me an email today. If I get an email within the next 7 days from you, right? So by June 7th, 2021, I will give you guys a 75% discount on that thing, right? Just email me directly though, because I appreciate you guys. Okay, so this stuff is not cheap, but is absolutely worth it. This is why, for you specifically, if you're watching this, right, now I care about you and I care about your success on it, okay? So, Michelle, that's what I would say, right? So you need those 5 things, you need these 3. If you're at the end of the undergrad years, you don't have one of those 8 things, 2 of those 8 things, 3 of those 8 things, especially publications, personal connections, or in particular, if you're in a situation where the GPA is not at or above the median, or the test needs to be retaken however many times, then it's something. Applying to FIU. That's awesome. You're very welcome. Excellent. Appreciate it. Yeah. I do love me some Florida. I went to USF for my postdoctoral fellowship in mental health law. My grandparents used to live in Clearwater. I love all the Florida places, right? I love UF. I love, FIU. I love, there's so many great places there. My mother actually went to Seminole High School. So, rock on Seminoles. So, okay, very good. So that's what I would say, Michelle, on that one, okay, is that the reason to be able to get the master's, and watch, there was a video I made the other day, Michelle, about should you do a master's or go straight to the PhD. So make sure to watch that one as well, okay? So let's see, guys, I got about 10 minutes. Okay, so John says, please share some of your experience regarding the difference between North American. Actually, guys, I'm going to read everybody's questions first, okay? So, and we can read them together. So, please share some of your experience regarding the difference between North American, European, British research environment and in atmosphere. Okay, that's number 1, right? Emerald says, hi, just dropping in to say thanks for sharing your content. Your videos help me get into my dream masters. Hey! Oh, God, Emerald, I'm so proud of you. Freaking A, man. This is great. Congratulations. I'm so proud of you. It's a wonderful photo of you too. Okay, great. And then Diaz says, hi, Jay, do you have any advice for applying for a different postdoc job on a very similar project from the same advisor that I applied before and had a final interview but didn't get it? Ah, interesting. Okay. So let's do Diaz first, then we'll go back to Janan, right? So Diaz is basically saying, okay, so here's a target supervisor, right? A target postdoc supervisor, right? We apply to the target postdoc supervisor. Oh, we get the interview, sweet, right? We may even get another interview, but then bam, 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 everything falls through wherever you didn't get it. Okay, so the key thing here, mate, the few key things are basically what has changed between the last time and this time. It really sucks to be able to not get into something and somebody get into it over you, but we should always try to learn from people who maybe got opportunities that we deeply desired but didn't land. In this case, if that individual who got an over you, if we can find out as much about them as possible, that's really going to help us out. Take a look if maybe they've got a postdoc faculty page, right, on the department's website, and take a look at their CV. Maybe they had more publications. Maybe they had more grant funding. Maybe they brought some funding with them, right? Maybe it was something where, they went to the same grad school as the target postdoc supervisor went to, or maybe their supervisor was somebody who's BFF with, best friends forever, who's BFF with the target supervisor, and hence they're kind of an internal candidate. And remember, guys, I made a whole video on becoming an internal candidate on this channel, so make sure that you go and watch that if you haven't watched that one already. That thing, you guys were begging me to make that video for forever. I'm so sorry it took me like a year to be able to make it, because I want to get all my thoughts together for you guys first, okay? So, very good. Bump, bump, bump. Let's see. Okay, so see what's different about that individual than you the first time that you were applying, right? Absolutely critical. Also, I'm sorry for how blurry or whatever this is. This happened last time or whatever. I went like this and then it fixed it. Hey, pretty good, right? So that's what I would say on that. So if the same advisor, what changed? I'm praying that you stayed in touch with that target supervisor such that once every 3 months to every 6 months, you sent them an update since the time of rejection, and that when you did get rejected, you wrote to them. And if you guys ever were in a situation where you need to write an email and you want some feedback, you want me to read the email with you, help to even craft it with you if it's an email, right? Not a personal statement or something like this, but an email, I can help you out with that, okay? Because these things are tact. It's the most important thing, right? This is, guys, academia is freaking strategy. Getting into grad school is strategy. Postdoc is strategy. That nobody cares. This is brutal to say, guys, but it's true. Nobody cares how passionate you are. I was the most passionate guy. Look at me. I'm ridiculously passionate, but nobody actually cares, right? And that sucks, right? But that's why it's important to learn the strategies and the tactics that'll actually get you in, because you can beat the freaking system. I'm telling you right now, I did it, right? You can do it. I'm just telling you right now, right? These are the kings of the kingdom. Nobody ever wants to talk about it and be open about it, but that's why I'm here for you guys, right? Okay, so the other thing is that, if you haven't stayed in touch, you got to get in touch with them immediately. But when you got rejected, I'm praying that you sent an email thanking them for their time, saying that, you'd be keen to be able to try again the next year, and, you'll stay in touch and keep them up to date on the latest and greatest. That's the idea, okay? Even though that's rough, right? Like, that's difficult to do, but still the right thing to do, okay? So other than that, very similar, different postdoc job, very similar project. Okay, if it's a different postdoc job for a very similar project, again, what new can you contribute to that new project is the question. Also, is it something that's on the same grant? That'd be a big question. Something that's on the same grant, is it a new grant? All this kind of stuff, right? But get to know your enemy, right? When I say your enemy, I mean the person who got it when you didn't. They are not your enemy, by the way. I'm just using that as an example, as a term to be able to suggest that, okay, you may not love the person because they got in over you the first time, but you can learn from them. It's a good thing, okay? So that's what I would say on that. Okay, Junan's question, let's go back to it. Okay, Junan's question is, please share some of your experience regarding, yes, difference between North American, European, British. Environment and atmosphere. They call the U.S. the United States of stress for a reason, right? We go fast, right? Or we like to go fast. The issue that we've got in the U.S. is there's too many damn universities, right? And especially for some of these programs like PsyDs, for example, there's 96 APA accredited PsyD programs. Take a look at the videos I've made on PsyD programs. I got one on what I perceive to be the top 10. People know they can make a boatload of money with an APA accredited PsyD program. So you'll have universities, like St. Phoenix of Maryland, which is not a real school, right? But they'll develop these things. You're welcome, Diaz, right? So I'm just thinking about this. If you guys didn't watch earlier in terms of me talking about little Dutch girls kicking pigeons, you have missed out on this stream. So make sure you go back and watch it. But that's the thing, is that the U.S., when you do go to a top-tier university, right? Like a really top tier university, like an R1, right? As opposed to like one of these small private schools and such that nobody's ever heard of. Then it's something where the environment tends to be a very dog-eat-dog environment and atmosphere. I think that's very important to understand, especially if you're working on grants. The most important thing, guys, when it comes to research, because this is what we're being asked about research, don't go to grad school expecting that you're going to be able to do the research you want, right? Your job is not to be a code general or something. Your job is to be a soldier, right? Your supervisor is the general. You got to be a good soldier, right? That kind of stinks when you're somebody like me who's like super independent. I like doing my own thing, and I think I'm right a lot of the time. And I mean, like, it's great for an entrepreneur, kind of crappy in terms of being an employee or grad student, right? I'll tell you. So that's an important thing to understand, is that you got to be a good soldier, right, in the US. And I would argue that there are countries in Europe, a great example is Britain, where this is twice as true as it is in the United States, right? My experience having gone to Oxford, and then I got the second doctorate, which is a university in Germany called the University of Konstanz, while I was living in Switzerland, take the train back and forth, right? In Britain, I went to Oxford. Oxford is like Oxford and Cambridge, mega old school, mega. When I say patriarchal, I hate terms like the patriarchy and all of this kind of stuff. Wah, 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 wah. Okay, I am talking about patriarchal in terms of being old school hierarchical, right? I'm not talking about men, okay? I'm talking about hierarchy, right? And there is a very strong hierarchy at those universities. They're the oldest universities in the world that have continuously been, in process, right, for the past almost 1,000 years now, 900 some odd years. So it's one of these things. If you got a really old school place like that, you should expect that it's going to be an old school program with old school people. You're going to have to deal with old school problems, right? And depending on the university in Europe, my issue is that oftentimes it depends what the university is, but oftentimes they feel like they're the underdog, right? Because in Europe, a lot of countries that are not native English speaking countries, like places that I've lectured, like a Spain or like a Denmark or like a Switzerland or like a Germany, amazing people, right? There's no doubt about it. But thinking that you're the underdog results in a situation where sometimes there's fewer research teams actively publishing in English. And yes, regardless of what I would love to be able to say, because I know how much great work is out there in other languages, if you want to get your work widely read and hence widely cited and hence get your reputation up internationally and get your H index going so that you can get tenure and raises and promotions and so forth, you need to be publishing in English. That can be more difficult in terms of what a lab usually focuses on, in terms of the journals that they focus on. If you're in like Switzerland, for example, yeah, people publish in English language journals, but they also publish a lot in German journals. And your work, there's 4 German-speaking countries, right? Austria, Switzerland, Germany, and Luxembourg. Okay, so out of that, your reach is minimized, right? And we don't really want that. So it's just something to be able to take into consideration. Okay, so that's what I would say about that. And then, sorry guys, I got 2 more, then I gotta go. Okay, so Louise says, I'll be starting my graduate program in California. Oh, CSU, nice. Fullerton, majoring in communication sciences and disorders. Thank you for grad school interview questions. You're welcome, Louise. This is great, man. And Andre says, love your videos. You are literally painting my path forward to the PhD. Thanks, Andre. Andre says, have you heard anything about doctoral programs at VCU? Off the top of my head, Andre, I have not. Right, I have not. Okay, let's see. Disaster 2D says, do you expect the role of a clinician changing? Is private practice still the most lucrative option for a professor, or is publishing? Dude, publishing research isn't lucrative for anybody, bro, right? This is not a thing, right? Okay, let's see. Academia is not what you should do if you want to make money, right? It's just not, right? You can use your academic skills and make money. That's what I do, right? So it's like both companies that I found. It's my first company. I built it, right? I scaled it and I sold it. Right. And then I built another company, right, that I'm running right now. And this is my hobby. This is what I do for fun. Right. And doing my consults with you guys is like the big joy of my life. I mean, Daria knows I have more fun talking with you guys one-on-one than I do doing anything else, which is why I love it when you guys book sessions. Not because I can take Daria out to nice dinners and all. I like it because I get to talk to you and I get to help you. Right, like this is the joy of my life, truly, is to be able to help you guys out in your careers, because I really didn't have anybody who helped me, right? Like that's the kind of sucky part, right? Is that I didn't have anybody to help me, so now like this is the blessing for me to help you guys, right? But role of a clinician changing. The big way it's going to change is the increased utility and the hopefully increased efficacy of models of telemental health. right? Telemental health, that stuff's going to go up, 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 right? And in person, but the good news is rates aren't going to go down. You'll just be able to get access to other markets so that you can be in the middle of nowhere, West Virginia, which is actually where I'm thinking of moving, nowhere, West Virginia, and you can end up, serving people in Utah, let's say, right? Provided that you've got the necessary licenses, of course, right? You will be able to really extend your reach and hopefully make even more money, which would be great. The sad thing in mental health is that if you take insurance, you're going to get taken to the cleaner. It's so hard to be really lucrative in a private practice in doing that. If you guys ever want help setting up your private practice, how to be able to scale these things to be able to get to 6 figures as fast as you can, definitely let me know. We can talk about that. Okay. So Andre, session with your website. Love your content. Thank you, Andre. Hey, man, I would love to be able to have a session with you. Seriously, it would be a joy for me. And the website, guys, that Andre's talking about is just this one, right? So it's just jphoenixsingh.com. Okay. So that's the website there. Okay, guys, I'm going to call it a day today. My one buddy is waiting for me. He's already texted me saying, "Where are you?" So I got to make sure that keep my obligations. But it's been great to be able to see you guys. And sorry that I haven't done a live in a while. You guys know the last month I was in Ukraine the entire month. It's great to be back. And I'm looking forward to seeing you guys again very, very soon. Remember, watch as many of the videos on the channel as you can. Leave comments below, like the video, share them with your friends, colleagues, and students. It means the world to me, and it helps the channel grow. I never, guys, thought that this channel would ever have freaking 10,000 subscribers. But by the end of the year, we're set to have about 11,500 subscribers, which makes no sense. It's an academia channel. It's an academia channel, right? But you guys are the reason why I do it and why this is so much fun for me. So thank you for giving me a hobby that I love to do. And thank you for giving me the pleasure of working with you guys also in these types of sessions. So, all right, guys, I will end it there. I appreciate you. Have a great night. Peace.